I love Italian music like that. It speaks a universal language, and you don't need a translator to capture the feeling. Genuine folk music springs from the life of the people and can strike a common chord in us all. My name is Ray Stewart. I'm a producer of television programs. Right now, I wish I were a musician because I, too, am seeking to strike a common chord, a theme calculated to show despair and then faith, hope, and promise. My job is to tell a story, the story of a king-sized change going on in Italy over the last few years. My problem is to chronicle a change and a need for a change in the national structure of farming, and yet keep it warm and human. For it is human, a human problem with its roots in the heart of the Italian peasant, the problem of who owns and controls the land. For these people, land represents life, because the land is the foundation of their life. So we must first find out who these Italian people are, what they do, what they want, what they need, and what goes on in their minds. I worked in my office trying to crack the problem. For unless these people come alive, unless the audience comes to know them well enough to understand their problems and how important they are to them, the result will be a dry, colorless collection of facts. And facts and figures are not the most important thing. The real story is about people. One good portrayal of these people is a group of portraits done by an Italian painter, Carlo Levi, who knows these people and loves them because he was born in Italy and lives among them. He has captured the essence of their feeling with his paintbrush in a way no movie camera and no words ever could. Words are hardly necessary to go with the pictures, but it seemed to me that Painter Levi's comments added to their strength.
I looked into their faces and painted them, and now I see not portraits, but real human beings, all bound together in lamentation and the perpetual hope of better things to come. They want not only bread, but a feeling of pride, freedom, and human dignity. In the villages are potential outlaws who have waited for months for someone to hire them. An elderly day laborer with 8 children, he has received 8 acres. The land came to him too suddenly, and from outside the world he understands. Can't you just see the fear, the mistrust these men of Calabria feel?
But I mustn't give the impression that all was unhappiness, fear, or hatred. There is, for instance, this film showing them in their lighter moments, dancing, enjoying themselves in costumes they no longer wear except for these festive occasions, but with the skill of generations still in their feet and the abandoned happiness that oppression combined with hot Mediterranean sun produces. The vital story of these Italian people is the story of how they faced a whole set of age-old customs and regulations. We're shown a new approach to the way they could use their land, reorganize their farms, open new lands, and increase their production and satisfaction. The story of a land reform. To ground myself on just what was the situation in Italy, just what the effect of the land reform efforts has been, I called on Dr. Piero Guadagnini, Consul General of Italy in Chicago. In your opinion, what has been the outstanding effect of the land reform program in Italy?
When we talk about land reform in Italy, we see two different aspects. That is, land redistribution and land rehabilitation. Both aspects have an economical, a social, and a political importance. Land redistribution means giving to the peasants some part of land which had not been efficiently used by their owners. The economical, political, and social aspects of that redistribution is, I think, obvious. The big problem in Italy is still overpopulation and underemployment. If you can utilize this land reform, giving possibility of work to masses of peasants who otherwise will not be able to find work, this is of extreme, as I said before, economical, social, and political importance.
As I talked with the Consul General, with other experts, and read about this problem of land ownership and control, the general picture began to fall into place. Now, much of Italy is farmed by progressive small farmers of the sort we all know. But this, unfortunately, is not the case in every part. There are certain regions, largely to the south of Italy, but also in the Po River Delta to the north, where progress has been slow. And these are the areas which have been specially selected for the application of land reform. These areas are characterized by large estates and farms where farming is conducted extensively, not intensively. That is, using every acre to its fullest, as Italy with its huge population so badly needs. In these areas of large farms, the workers tend to congregate in large villages under intolerable conditions. These villages often contain a population of 40 or 50,000 people who live as much as 9 or 10 miles from their work. Now, under such conditions, no improvement is possible. The farm worker in these villages usually has no more than 1, 2, or 3 small rooms where he lives with his family and his mule, used for work and transport of every kind. These people live on a starvation level, and they have as far back as memory serves. They're afflicted with unemployment. Many farm laborers think themselves lucky if they can get from 130 to 150 days' work in the year. And the very existence of them and their children depends upon the capricious will of large absentee landlords. The dwellings in these great villages, which are typical of the area, are primitive to the extreme. It wouldn't be far wrong to say that 2/3 of the rural labor force of Italy is wasted, partly by the seasonal unemployment and partly by the time spent in daily journeys to and from the fields. The basic problem, then, is how to provide these people with the bare minimum of the basic necessities of life. For when people live under conditions such as these, who can blame them for hopelessness, despair, and unrest? But to get down to what can be done about this, you must know something about the land itself, the soil upon which these people depend for their livelihood. You must know that the very land with which they start, let alone the way they have organized their system of ownership, presents a difficult problem. And what must be realized is the barrenness of the soil. How the Italian peasant farmer has to struggle hard on the plot of ground he rents just to grow a bare minimum of food for his family to eat. You have to understand that the soil is dry because there is too little rainfall. The Of course, when you have just a little bit of soil, you must literally work it to death so that it loses its ability to grow abundant crops. Then, of course, when the rains do fall, it erodes away. If you can understand the people, and then the soil, the land, where they live, then you can realize the importance of the relationship between the two, how land affects people. But to present these relationships, I have to use figures. To make the figures as graphic as possible, I went to our art department with my problem. What I wanted to demonstrate was simple enough. Italy is overcrowded by most standards. Too many people on too little soil to be able to accomplish a high standard of living. Too many of the hard-working but sullen people Levi captured in his portraits. A few days later, as I was in the feet-on-the-desk stage of program development, one of the girls from the art department brought over the charts she had been working on and proceeded to explain what she had in mind. Her first chart showed how Italy compared in size with her own state of Arizona. Actually, they're approximately the same size. With this comparison made so graphically, the next point of illustration becomes somewhat startling. Although Italy is only the size of Arizona, a tiny land area as compared with the United States, Italy has a population of 46 million people, which is nearly one-third of the population of the United States. There were other facts, too, of course, and to get across the idea that the land is not only crowded, but that a larger proportion of the people have to make their living off of what little land there is in Italy, she had prepared an easel display for me, which she proceeded to explain. Just a little fewer than half the total number of people who are employed, who work on the land. Compare that with 15% who work on the land in the United States, or with 5% who work the land in Great Britain. Now, all told, there are about 9 million workers in Italy who earn their livings on farms. But only about 3 million of them work on soil that they or their family own. Well, that's only about 37%. In the United States, by comparison, at least twice that proportion live on their own farms. Going further with the figures, another almost 4 million of the Italians who work on farms are tenants. Now, farm tenants in Italy aren't like farm tenants in our Middle West. For instance, the Italian peasant has to pay a very high ground rent and often has little to say about what he can grow, and his rented land is probably miserably small. Well, as we said, almost 4 million Italian peasants are tenant farmers, and another 2 million approximately are simply day laborers. They have no rights in the land and virtually no security. To further visualize the complicated land picture in Italy, she had drawn a map to show that although 9 million people own land in Italy, a small group of 1 million landowners own a large part, 4/5 actually, of the land. This, of course, crowds the already crowded land still more. The graphs were, of course, a tremendous help in trying to visualize this problem of land ownership, which is really one of the basic reasons why the reorganization of farming, a land reform, was necessary in Italy. The landlords who own the great estates upon which these people work are almost always absentee landlords. They live far from their land in Naples, Rome, Milan, or Paris. And they see their estates only at rare and irregular intervals. Usually, they lease their land to a kind of sub-landlord who, in turn, lets out small plots to peasants, trying to squeeze the most out of both the peasant and the landlord in the process. Now, the result of this system of ownership is that the landlords don't look after the land themselves. By letting out the land, they obtain incomes large enough to live in good style, and that's about all they care about. So, of course, under these conditions, these crowded conditions, and under this system of unequal ownership, under the conditions where peasant farmers are poor and struggling, something has to crack. Something has to be done. And that's what my problem was, to tell what was done, but somehow to emphasize that it isn't a group of figures. It's the effect upon the lives of thousands of crowded peasant farmers, human beings, and their hope for the future.
At the very bottom of all this, I wanted to put across what any farmer can tell you, what you already know yourself in your own life, that what men, farmers all over the world aspire to for themselves and for their families are rights in the soil. They demand, they need something more than just a barren strip of dirt if they are to become efficient farmers. And that's where my problems came in. For what I was dealing with was this abstract idea of rights, but a very important idea, even if abstract. For most important things in human life are abstract: freedom, God, worship, family, love. What I was talking about was not soil, dirt. It was not just an animal called human being. It was not anything physical. It was an idea, the relationship between men which govern the way farmers use their land. This picture doesn't tell me anything about who owns this soil, yet it's all I can picture. This picture doesn't tell me whether this man has rights, yet it's all I can picture. This portrait of a child doesn't let me convey any idea of what his future prospects are, yet it's as close as I can come. This picture hardly tells how this man's vitality is sapped because he works far from home. This picture doesn't tell me that a man can't get his heart behind his farming because he knows most of what he grows will not go to his hungry children, but will go to his landlord in Naples. The picture of these men doesn't tell me that because they can't borrow money, they get less from their land than they might if they could buy fertilizer and better breeding stock. This picture hardly tells me how hard this man strives to produce food under impossible conditions because his farm is much too small. And this man, who has no farm at all, can his picture tell the futility of his life when he knows he'll be lucky to find work half the days of the year? And this woman, why should she work hard when she knows her children have no hope for any better life than the bare subsistence and struggling for others, which is all she knows? And this man, holding his daughter tightly to him, who can picture his ideas, his rights? But these hopes, dreams, aspirations are what count. They're what make my story vital, interesting, real, worth telling. No picture can tell anything about how these laws were carefully thought out to assure a democratic process respecting the rights of the individual while still recognizing the need for progress. You just can't picture abstract ideas.
But people in Italy have known for a long time that something needed to be done about the way their farming was organized. They knew there was too little land, so for years they've had a program of reclamation underway. But after the war, in the general reassessment that came with the defeat of Mussolini's armies, they saw clearly the need for changing the way in which their farmland was owned, breaking it up into smaller farms so that the man who actually does the work can get the results of his efforts. Now, the people of Italy, in other words, recognized the advantages and the social stability that can come when men have the incentive to work and when things are organized so that if you do work hard, you can get somewhere. In 1949 and 1950, the Italian Parliament passed 2 laws setting up this reform. These laws tackle the problems where they're at their worst, in southern Italy and in the Po River Delta to the north. The way the land reform laws worked, the government distributed to the peasants by lot land purchased from the large and mostly absentee landowners. Some of the peasants compared the land redistribution with the day of resurrection. How much was bought from any one landlord depended on how large the estate was and how much it was worth. The owners were paid with interest-bearing government bonds, which will be repaid from the money the peasants pay as they buy their land from the government. The difference between the purchase price plus the cost of improvements and the price paid by the peasants is made up by the government. And although this is an important program, don't get the idea that all of Italy is involved. Many areas don't need land redistribution, and many areas where changes are needed are as yet untouched. I wondered what possible resentment the landowners would have against government purchase of land for the redistribution program. So when I visited Monsignor Luigi Lagudi of the National Catholic Rural Life Congress, who had recently revisited his native Italy, that was one of the questions I asked.
The only objection, actually, that was made has rather sentimental reason. I heard an old Marchese say to me, well, there is the place where my forefathers were born and reared, and now I'm losing. But it's much more important to think of the present generations and the present children than all the dead Marchesi in the world.
When the government takes title to the large estates, the land is far from ready for resale to the family farmers. Land that has been held in uncultivated hunting preserves must be cleared for farming. Rocky soil must be deep plowed so new seed beds can be prepared. Stumps and brush must be cleared away. Whole new farms are made ready by using modern heavy equipment that saves thousands of hours of back-breaking labor. People who have never owned land need to master the latest techniques. The government helps them, for instance, in getting started on machine threshing, on improved methods of olive oil extraction, on balancing their crop rotations to include suitable fodder to feed increased numbers of livestock, and on organizing the production of fruits and vegetables for canning. Extension methods similar to those long used in the United States to encourage better farming are being tried out. But the big task remains to the individual farm families. Knowing the land is theirs, theirs to work, theirs to improve, theirs to benefit from, makes all the difference. You can't picture that difference, but it's there. There's no picturing incentive. To the farm families fall the task, with government help, credit, and blessing, of making family farms out of barren land that once was only lightly farmed or grazed. Land that is hilly, full of rocks, where water is precious. Given a few years, you'll be able to see the difference when hard work and diligence like this pay off in better farms, better homes, better people. Well, you've seen what I have to tell. You've seen how it's a moving story of people. But your own knowledge of the way the world works would lead you to question just how well all this is working out. So did I. So I asked some people who had been there to tell me just how well it was working out and just how effective this attempt to rebuild farming in Italy had been. One not-so-optimistic viewpoint was expressed by Mr. Frank Pinelli. Mr. Pinelli is now of Des Moines, Iowa, but earlier was mayor of a town in southern Italy in the 20s and still keeps up his contacts there.
Land reform has helped some, but I don't believe that it's the answer to the need. There are too many problems involved in this land reform that I really don't know what the ultimate result is going to be. At any rate, the government is trying to show that it's willing to give something to the peasant. As I always state many times, there is not enough land to go around. And the problem will be always a question mark. Now there has been a lot going on over there. There have been some of the peasants probably have been satisfied with the setup. Some they have not.
Monsignor Lagudi, on the other hand, while recognizing the problem, was considerably more optimistic when I asked him if he thought the land reform had been successful.
It isn't easy, but it is working out as well as you could possibly expect it. Even if we only got a small percentage of the average is never over 400 anyway, even in baseball.
Dr. Guadagnini, the Consul General, left no question about his opinion, for just as I was finishing my discussion with him, he said,
In conclusion, I would like to say, and I most sincerely believe this to be the truth, that the land reform is the most important thing that the Demo-Christian government has done in Italy in the recent years to improve the standard of life of Italian population and to better the conditions on, as I said before, economical, political, and social point of view.
And so, armed with this insight into the very lives of these people, their hopes and aspirations, as well as statistics, I sat down to write the script, fired with the knowledge that if only I could find the words, I had a vital human story to tell, one which concerns every person in the nation, indeed the world, who wishes to see the advance of human dignity. What then do these people of the soil, these essential cogs in our world civilization, aspire to for themselves and their families? They want rights in the soil so they can claim the promise and the security that can come to them when they are secure in their rights to their land. Then can they produce food and produce it more abundantly. And then, too, will they bend every effort to become high-producing farmers, for they know that where they have sown, they will reap. They will become responsible citizens who will stand steadfastly for justice, for freedom, for dignity of the human individual. And then will they begin to realize the biblical promise made to them generations ago when it was prophesied. They shall sit, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid.